With the recent release co-op platform adventure It Takes Two being hailed by critics and receiving a massive 10 out of 10 from myself for the review, I sat down with one of the stars of the game, Joseph Balderrama, to discuss the experience of making the game and some of the challenges that came with it. I guess just first of all, how's it been since the game released a few weeks ago? Congratulations. First off, the game's been received amazingly. Like the reviews have been through the roof. So it must have been a crazy time with it coming out during this, pandemic and stuff, working on it for a very strange period. So just how's the last few weeks been for you?
I mean, it's been really exciting to see how much people loved it. Just because in the making, Annabelle and I started on this. It was May 2019, I guess, so 2 years ago, and it was kind of a wacky thing on paper, and she and I did the mocap for it, so we were really involved kind of integrally throughout the whole process. And it's just been so gratifying to see how people have responded in such a good way. I think in a way as well, like I think Joseph sort of his idea to make it all kind of about love in a weird way, sort of made, and the fact that it was, that it's a co-op that has to be played with someone. You can't get away with not having someone playing this game. And it's, the very premise of it is about having a relationship with someone who you're playing the game with, and hopefully that gets mirrored in the game as well. And like in a pandemic where people are isolated and people are, not necessarily taking care of their relationships that well, possibly, I thought it was really apt, weirdly, that it came out when it did. And it clearly resonated with all kinds of different people playing it with their kids, people playing it with their partners, people playing it with their friends. It seems to be it seems to hit a lot of marks. And I think actually one of the weird things is, Joseph's a bit of a visionary, and sometimes his vision isn't that clear to other people. In terms of, me and Annabelle were like, wow, I don't know how this game is going to sit, who's going to, but Joseph knew. He had it clear in his mind from the beginning. So he, that's why he's who he is. And we just turn up and do silly voices. So yeah, so it's been really fun, and engaging with some of the fans of the game has been fun too. And I'm thrilled. I'm really just happy. It's definitely one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. There was so much freedom and so much play in the making of it, and hopefully that comes across.
Yeah, because definitely when it got announced, I know it was kind of getting teased for it. I think it was like June, it came out and it was just like, we're working on this, and you couldn't really tell anything about it. And it was November when the trailer kind of came out, and I just sent it to my girlfriend, who's not really into gaming at all. I just drag her along, like, oh, we should play this. She's like, okay, we must. And then I showed her this. She's like, oh my God, this looks so fun. Because it just as soon, like, because it's right at the start of the trailer, it's just, Dr. Hakim, and he just straight away was like, we need to fix your relationship. And she was like, oh my God, I'm in. So we knew straight away, I was like, we're going to play for this whole game together. And it was just not that we're on like the verge of breaking up or anything, but I think just the fact it being, I can't think of any other game where it's just so focused on, although you can play it, like you said, with a good friend, but the fact playing it with somebody you've got a relationship with just enhances the experience so much, because since it relies on you working together so much, it's like, although there were times I was like, oh my God, we're never going to finish this game, but it just completely enhanced it. So it's just, like you said, it's just, I think on paper it does sound pretty crazy, but in typical Joseph fashion, he manages to do it.
Yeah, I agree. When he explained to us, it's about a couple who are getting a divorce, and the sort of kind of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids moment where they sort of just get magically transported to this crazy world, which just gets crazier and crazier as you go through it. Yeah, we were like, okay, so good. Okay, fine. That's we'll go along with this. And I think it was just nice. Annabelle and I had an immediate connection, as well as with Joseph. And so we kind of, we improvised an awful lot through the game. Obviously it was a rich, we were following the storyline and stuff, but within the making of it, we got to play a lot. And that was huge. I mean, coming from a background where it was my first mocap job. I've done a lot of voicing on computer games previously, but never the full mocap sort of journey. And so it was a huge learning curve on that front for me. But I was just staggered at how efficient the making of it was. We would go to Stockholm for 2 or 3 days, once a month ish for a period of time. And we would get through something like 30 pages of dialogue in that time. And comparing that to film and television, where you're lucky if you complete 3 pages in a week. It's sort of it was just liberating, because you just went boom, boom, next scene, and it I think actually really helped to build the relationship between the two characters, because we were so intensively just us. And actually Joseph, who did the motion capture for Hakim, he was the body, and I did the sort of face and voice for it. But that was a whole other world of crazy.
Of course I remember.
Are you really ready to talk to Rose?
Why not? She's our daughter.
Well, can you talk to her without fighting each other?
Of course we can.
Rose isn't the problem. He is.
She is.
Crazy. Doing that character as well. Because that was obviously done post. I put my voice on it and stuff after we would do the scenes. So we'd be acting with Joseph in the scenes, and he would be doing what he was doing, which was nuts. And every time after we cut, I'd be like, I'm going to have to make that make sense when you But it was great. It gave him such a sort of otherworldly quality and a kind of vibrancy, which I think, I could never have done that if I was doing the mocap as well. Only Joseph had that in him.
Got to keep doing the hip shakes every 3 seconds, every single line.
And those hips were something else.
It says you did some voice work with A Way Out, the previous game by Joseph.
Yeah.
So what was the kind of journey from doing some additional voice work on that to ending up as one of the lead roles in It Takes Two?
I mean, I'd like to say it's because I was he spotted my talent, but unfortunately, it was just simply that I got an audition. I think he maybe remembered. He certainly did remember me from A Way Out when we met at the audition, but I don't think that was massively coordinated on his front, at least. It was just an audition that came along. I guess my agent, did their job and got me in the room, as it were. And it was a strange audition, because it was with Annabelle, so we auditioned together. And I think that's how they met couples. I don't know how many they met, but they met however many couples they met. They were essentially, I guess, what you would call a chemistry read. And we just hit it off, immediately. I remember it was in a Spotlight in London, and we went into this we met up previously just to go through the lines a little bit. And we just we never met before, but we just connected immediately and just kind of hit it off. So the audition was predominantly just a massive improvisation, a la sort of, it was sort of like a very early version, if you like, of the therapy session scenes, where we improvised kind of like When Harry Met Sally-ish, which was one of the I mean, I know lots of people have written about the inspiration for the game, but actually I think When Harry Met Sally and those rom-coms were much more an inspiration than anything Pixar or Frozen, or it actually, I don't think the genesis of the idea came from an animation. It came much more from old rom-coms, really, with a bit of a heart, I guess. And so that's what we did in the audition. We just improvised one of those scenes that ended up in that sort of pepper through the game. And yeah, we just sort of were riffing a little bit, and both were lucky enough to be offered the parts.
That's because I think, so by the time this comes out, my review should probably be out. I think I do compare it to a Pixar film, not maybe in its narrative, because that's really interesting to you mentioned When Harry Met Sally. That's actually one of me and my girlfriend's favorite films as well, so it probably checks out. But it does definitely follow the same beats as like a rom-com. I think the Pixar comparison, at least for me, was just the creativity of it all, which you kind of come to expect with Pixar in terms of like all the wacky ideas they're coming out with, which to see that combined with like When Harry Met Sally was just a match made in heaven.
Yeah, no, I think when you look at the game, it looks beautiful. Like, it's stunning. The artwork in it and all the graphics and stuff are, and just the worlds they created, never mind how good they look, are just exceptionally imaginative. And but I think in that respect, it definitely looks, and in that way, and the music, it feels Pixar-y when you look at it, but actually the genesis of the relationship idea and the story, I think, is much more adult. Not that those Pixar stories are kind of universal. They have loads of adult themes running through them, I think they're clever in that they do resonate with both children and adults, but obviously they're made predominantly for children. But I think this game was not made actually for children, and that was one of the conversations we had early on. I was like, is this a kid's game? Like, I don't know what. He was like, no, it's not. It's absolutely not a kid's game. In the same way that, When Harry Met Sally wasn't, those sorts of movies, I think did have a large, I think Joseph just loves rom-coms, basically, though you'd never think that necessarily. I think maybe he'd be more into sort of, I don't know, wacky or crazier stuff, but which I'm sure he is as well. But he just loves rom-coms. So, I think he wanted to, and he said, no one's ever made a rom-com game. And I think that part of his MO is always, what hasn't anyone done? I think his spirit is one of boundary pushing and sort of trying to come up with something that, that he hasn't seen before. And he's seen a lot of stuff. So
I think, going off the kind of When Harry Met Sally vibe, obviously you're saying a lot of it was kind of improvisation and stuff, but obviously there's a challenge there because, later on as the game goes, we start to understand that Cody and May do still have a deep like love for each other, and it's just kind of been buried by other things. So how did you and your co-star kind of go about ensuring that, well, especially the kind of first opening moments of the game is kind of constant bickering, how did you kind of keep alive the fact that there is a connection between them there that just gets kind of slowly gets revealed more and more, rather than just, okay, like, how are these people ever together? Because you have to show they do love each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I think, and by the way, we improvised lots, but Suni, who wrote the dialogue and wrote the game with Joseph, that we were following their storyline and trajectory, and I certainly can't take credit for all of that. But I think that it was a conversation that we had a lot during the making of it. Is at what point do these two characters, because we obviously we meet them at a point where their relationship is already, as far as they're concerned, past the point of repair. And I think Joseph sort of, and they sort of didn't want to show how they led up to that, because the game was going to show you that as it unwound. It was you would retrospectively understand how these characters did have a genuine love for each other, and that it wasn't, it was like many relationships that fail. You just lose the love, you forget what it was, that nub, that genesis that keeps you, that was ignited, and then it gets extinguished, and people either successfully relight it or they can't manage it. But I think that was a clever thing with the game, is finding out slowly, the first half, or certainly the first third of the game, these two characters are, they don't really see, they're still selfish. And I think that's the key, is that that's what unlocks, that's the magic that unlocks. I don't want to, no spoilers, but I think what they discover through playing together is that actually they were both very selfish, and that's what extinguished the relationship and the love. And so not not being outward looking, but being inward looking is what kills things. And so I think that kind of just quite organically started to happen. And in the writing, Suni and Joseph started to sort of plant seeds where the characters would suddenly have moments of mini realizations of, oh yeah, I mean, remember when we did that and we went to the ski lodge, and they'd have these moments that were almost breakthrough moments, but then something would happen and they'd tumble down a ski slope or whatever. But those moments were actually some of the most gratifying to play, because they were out of the madness. You got these little pockets of like sincerity and connection between those two characters, where they were nearly understanding what this was all about. And I think it's an interesting examination of that. If only people could have that playful sort of journey with relationships, they might find that more of them succeed. But who knows what happens to them in the end? That's ambiguous anyway.
That was actually one of my, again, we're not to spoil anything, but it was just kind of the journey as well that's introduced later on about passion and hobbies and stuff, that it kind of aligned with me. It's like, oh, there's no point in doing it because you can't get paid for stuff like that. And it was a really poignant moment, because I think there's a lot of people, I mean, it's probably been personal because in the arts field and stuff, but it's like, you don't have to follow a hobby, it doesn't have to be a career. And I loved that journey between both of them. Is like, hobbies are important, especially in relationships. Like, you both need to have passions, which of course, like Dr. Hakim's like teaching about passion, which was all brilliant, but that was a really stuff that took me by surprise. There's loads of parts in the game that took me by surprise, but in terms of doing the motion capture and stuff, was that purely just the kind of animated cutscenes, or were you involved with, because obviously there's the animations of the characters kind of jumping and stuff. Obviously I'm not saying you can do like a double front flip jump, maybe you can.
Sadly not.
Because I remember every time I made Cody sprint, I was like, there is no way they've got an actor to sprint with his arms flailing behind them.
I mean, no, I didn't. I did lots. We did do running so they could get the mechanics of my character running, but I certainly didn't. I wasn't able to do the somersaults in the air and things like that. That's where the wizards at Hazelight took over, thankfully. But we did. I mean, there was lots of stuff that we had to capture that were gameplay. Certainly the voice stuff, but also some of the movements. But a lot of the jumping and leaping and things would not be us, but were based on things that we would do, and then the all the animators would then use that data to animate us doing much cooler things than we actually were doing when we were mocapping it.
That's probably good to know you don't sprint like that. It would have been. I love these sprints so much. I'd always just zoom in as I was like, that is because like May just has a normal, really like athletic run, and Cody just throws himself around.
Yeah, Cody. I mean, it was funny actually, because as the game developed, I realized that Cody was actually he was basically slightly like the slacker, the loser. I don't know what you want to call him, but he was, he was always scared, and he's, and I think that was kind of nice as well, that they sort of flipped what might be archetypical, roles in, I guess more traditional, not modern, but traditional relationships where maybe the man is more whatever. And I think, May was definitely wore the trousers in that relationship. And she was the brave one. And she was the, I think in the game, what's funny, some of the gameplay stuff, it seems like as well, she's just much better, basically cooler things than I do throughout the game, which did become a slight sore point.
I love that. I know there were so many points like when my girlfriend got the moon boots. I was like, "What? I want the moon boots." I mean, I loved being able to change size, but there were a couple of times I was like, "What? How do you get that?" Even though everybody get like all. That's one of the things I kind of praise in reviews. Like every tool you get is cool, so it's good to go back. And I think we're going to replay it, and she'll play as Cody, and I'll play as me, so we'll get a kind of new perspective. But I think that dynamic really came across with us. Like ended up bickering. I was like, "This isn't fair. I want to be able to do that."
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, that happened when we were making it as well. She seemed to get much cooler stuff than quite often.
I've got to ask a particular scene because I keep playing it and it kind of left my mind for a bit because I think I pushed it out. The scene again, I'll try not to spoil it, but with the elephant toy,
Yeah.
was it was so out of nowhere because when Cody when you both suggested it, I was like, oh, don't do that. That's a shame. But then when it actually happened, I remember I paused the game. I was like, I don't want to do this. This is horrible. What was that like to film? Because it's really horrible scene.
It was really horrible. I mean, it was so dark. Like, I think when we first got to that scene, I was like, this is really dark, Joseph. This is like, and actually, it was actually much worse when we got to the final bits when they were, dragging the elephant.
It's horrible.
Over across the table and once we actually saw it, it was even worse actually, because obviously when we're mocapping, we're in a room where we don't have, cutie looking sweet, and we were dragging essentially a lifeless thing when we were doing the motion capture for the scene and stuff. So in a sense, that even though you're making it real for yourself, and I hope we were playing it for real. It wasn't like Joseph, we discussed it. He was like, no, I want this to be like the jeopardy has to be high, and the difficulty that they have in doing this terrible thing. It has to feel like a real thing. Otherwise it's not going to have any impact. And it won't feel like the stakes won't be high enough, when you're playing it. But yeah, it was really horrible. It was, I can't really put it any other way. It was dark and that's Joseph for you, really. There's these moments that I guess he wanted to have some, his previous games have pretty dark stuff going on in them as well. And I guess he wanted to, despite the color and the vibrancy and the rom-com, he still wanted to let everyone know that he still had the darkness within him, I guess.
I think that was why it was kind of such a shock, because a way out, I was like, okay, it's, hardened prisoners, like what happens, happens. It's just the elephant combined with the voice and the most innocent voice ever. And Cody's like, we're going to hell for doing this. I was like, what is going on?
That makes it way worse in a way than any of the sort of dark things you might find in a game that is in a dark world. Like you say, you kind of expect, you're kind of conditioned to be ready to sort of experience hard moments, but this sort of just like kind of comes from nowhere, and then they follow through, and it's pretty awful.
Yeah, I was just like, oh, they're not going to follow through, and then like the leg came off. I was like, oh my god, it's just getting worse and worse.
I know. When we were doing the post work on the voice work, when we were at, after they'd done a lot of we'd done the mocap and the sort of polishing off bits, when we saw what we were animating too, and I was like, oh my god, it's so much worse than I'd imagined. So yeah, well, I'm glad that Joseph will be happy that everyone was horrified at it.
I can imagine he'll be very happy with the reaction. I think I was almost crying, but thankfully it kind of picked up again. But have you had the chance to play the game yourself? Are you much of a gamer at all or anything?
I haven't yet, but Annabelle's kids are obsessed with it.
Right. Okay.
And he keeps sending me videos of them playing the game, and so that's pretty cool. And so they are like #1 fans of the game. She's got two a boy and a girl, and so they play. I actually haven't worked out. I actually must ask her if they have switched and who's Cody and who's Ray. I think her son is normally Cody, but yeah, I don't know if they've switched over yet. But I haven't had a chance to play. So I think I might be receiving my copy soon.
Oh, so. Cool. It would be a very strange experience, to be fair, especially just because I was saying.
Yeah, it's funny. My kids are quite young. They're still like they're younger than Annabelle's, and so I sort of have been being metered with my exposure of games and stuff with them yet. So but I'd love them to. I've shown them lots of the cutscenes and stuff like that, which they think are great fun.
Yeah, because I was looking at your other work as well. As I didn't write you were in the Game of Thrones game a while back, like because I loved the Telltale one. It's just, I mean,
Yeah.
I must commend you on your accent work. It is unbelievable.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Which
That's
that
very-
brings me on to we've spoken a lot about Cody and we've mentioned the legend himself, Dr. Hakim, or the Book of Love. What was obviously you said you weren't doing the motion capture and stuff, so I imagine keeping up was quite difficult. But it must have been like a kind of nice experience to change from the, like you said, the anxious, uptight nature that Cody often has to just this insane, eccentric character who just keep literally just kind of keeps jump scaring you throughout the game. He just pops up and just screams in your face. So
Exactly.
was it a fun experience? I imagine to just keep.
Oh, it was great fun. I mean, he was such a lunatic, such a crazy guy.
Use your magnet powers, and the attraction will warm you up, baby. Yeah, you feel that? Mwah, 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 mwah. You just feel the warmth. Mwah, kiss it. You like? What is wrong with that guy?
He's obscene.
Guy. And every time we kind of we got to do when we, because what was interesting is that because Joseph sort of became Hakim basically when we were filming the scenes in mocap. And obviously when you mocap, the voice capture and the mocap is all simultaneous. So what you hear when you see the scenes is what we recorded on the whole when we filmed it. Obviously, with the exception of Joseph's voice. So it was really interesting how what I struggled with was trying to basically remove myself from Joseph's cadence and his sort of vocal interpretation and making that marry with what was physically there. Because obviously when I put Hakim's voice on it, the mocap had at least to a certain degree been done. So I was doing it kind of like traditional ADR where or like when you do animation, like on animation, frequently you're animating to picture or you're capturing to picture. So it was a really actually a technically really challenging exercise to basically lip sync sort of someone else's performance. And it was, I think the only thing that gave me a unique insight into being able to do it was because I was there when Joseph did do it. So I had that in my memory bank, as it were. But it was so much fun. Like he was so unhinged and so kind of larger than life, to the point where I was like, oh, this is going to be too much. People are going to be, which I think some people probably are, just irritated by him because he's sort of he's intense and he's in your face and he kind of is always there, as you say, screaming in your face. But hopefully he has enough I mean, I loved him. I thought he was, he had a lot of charm about him, and he himself goes through a journey, weirdly. I think at the end of the game, he has a sort of, as a crisis of self-confidence, which is the one thing that he never has any crisis of self-confidence. That's sort of like the premise of his character, is that he is entirely without self-doubt. And then suddenly at the end, there's a few moments where you see him kind of have a mini meltdown where he's like, no, I don't know what I'm talking, and he has a crisis of confidence. And, that was all loads of fun too to play. And I was born in Mexico, and my heritage is sort of half Hispanic, and my mom is from the US. So the two characters kind of, I was able to bring my own heritage and history. I kind of also slightly, it was a sort of an homage to my favorite Spanish actor, Antonio Banderas, who I kind of, he was part of inspiration. It was part Antonio Banderas and part, I think maybe Al Pacino somewhere in there mixed in. But he was just, yeah, I loved him. He's so much fun.
Yeah, again, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment towards the end when May has her big moment, and it was so strange because you see Hakim, he really just kind of windows down. I can't remember the exact line, but he says something really poignant and sweet to me.
Yeah.
Before, and I remember we were, because me and my girlfriend played it like together in my house, and then we'd play it online as well, so we get through it. And just both of us were like, it was just kind of sounds like, oh, that was such a touching moment from this book that's just been screaming about passion for the last 2 hours. And it was really nice to see that because what I think he is kind of the mascot of the game in some ways is when you play the game, when the game's loading, you just see him in the bottom right spinning, and he's just always there. So it was really sweet to see him actually come to terms of like, sometimes just screaming in people's faces. And despite like the things he says are pretty true, I think like, the lessons he's telling like are important. Just his the way he his delivery is a bit maybe strapping people to chairs is probably not going to get him very far. But that was probably my favorite moment in the game, is when he just comes out and says to me something that really encapsulates, especially the last half of the game to me.
The bit where she's going on stage. I mean, definitely. I mean, that was all very. We wanted him to have, to have a moment where, Hakim in a way is human within the concept of the world. He has a humanity as well, and I think I'm glad that resonated, because that was definitely that was what we were trying to do. So that's very
I guess my final question to you before I let you go is, since you are the Book of Love himself, what do you think the key to love is? No pressure.
Oh man, the key to love. Wowza. I don't know. I think I need Hakim here with me to tell me what to say. The key to love.
I think he would just say passion.
I think passion. I think that I think it's kind of like what I was sort of touching on earlier. I think ultimately it's a lack of selfishness. I think true love is about selflessness. And if you're able to have that, then I think love comes a lot easier. And then I think that's sort of enduring then, if you can give yourself over and eliminate ego and so on. I think that's probably the key, because I think that's what ruins it, is when people become, they put their own, I guess everyone has needs, so they're important, but I think if you're able to be selfless, love has a much better chance of survival.
You can blame my girlfriend for that question. I was like, what do you want me? That was the last question. She was like, ask him the key of love. And I was like,